Good. All right, good evening. It's 7:31 p.m. We are going to call this regular meeting of the Rutherford Board of Education on September 13th. We're going to ask everyone to rise if you can, face the flag for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Mr. Kelly, please take roll.
Mrs. Ahmed, Mr. Bogosian,
Present.
Mr. Conti, Mr. Healy,
Here.
Mrs. Jones,
Present.
Mr. Mazzone,
Here.
Dr. Racine,
Here.
Mr. Sprayberry,
Present.
Dr. Olati.
Here.
You have a quorum.
The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Act was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meeting of public bodies at which any business affecting their interests is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the Rutherford Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place posted on the bulletin board outside the Borough Clerk's office, mailed to the Herald, South Bergenite, and the Record newspapers, and filed with the Borough Clerk. Hard copies of the agenda are available in the meeting room, and the agenda is posted electronically on Friday before the meeting date on the district's website at www.rutherfordschools.org. Subsequent to the meeting, a video of the meeting will be uploaded to the district's website, www.rutherfordschools.org. The video links can be found by opening the Board of Education link and clicking on Public Meetings and then Videos. So board members, in your packets, you have two sets of minutes. One are the regular meeting minutes and the other are the executive session minutes, both for August 23rd. Are there any questions or comments about those sets of minutes? All right, hearing none, I'll ask Mr. Kelly to please enter those. And we are going to move to a special presentation.
Thank you. Actually, my report of the superintendent in the presentation is embedded in the agenda annually, twice a year. I have to report on the student safety data system, incident report, and HIB training and programs. And in January or thereabouts, you get the first part of the year. That is there for the full report. You'll see that under report period 1. And then the second report we do now with the first for the total. Our numbers are always relatively low compared to many districts with the number of students that we have. This year, they are extremely low. Obviously, last year with grades 4 to 12 being on a hybrid schedule and 30% or more of our students remote, the number of things such as violence or vandalism or substance abuse or bullying or excessive tardies or excessive cutting of a class, which might lead to a suspension, were minimal. So total number of incidents that led to a suspension for the entire year were 7, which is a very low number. And like I said, usually it is low, but last year was obviously an anomaly with the students' attendance and the amount of students who are remote. The HIB training report, we had went over this twice previously, and that's just the total number of programs done for either students or staff for training on HIB-related activities. By that I mean it's not just things about how not to be bullying someone, but it's also training the staff about how to recognize incidents and the process that has to be put in place. So I don't know if there are any questions from the board about that or comments. The opening of school was very successful, despite the fact that it was a very, very stormy, rainy day. But I was very pleased with the opening. As I said to the board, I got to visit each school and walk the halls and visit some classrooms. And it was really wonderful, again, to see full buildings, full hallways, full classrooms, a lot of excitement and energy, not just from the students, but from the faculty and the staff. On the opening day for teachers, I met with every faculty in their buildings, and again, the energy and the enthusiasm was very high. So it really is great to see it. Some of our co-curricular programs, like here in the high school with band and athletics, are already well underway. In the other schools, they're beginning those programs. So, you know, the sense of what used to be is coming back, and it's palatable, I think, with the students. I want to commend the schools for their recognition of the September 11th anniversary. Every school had some program, age appropriate, from the kindergarten kids being visited by first responders in town and getting to give them a thank you note and a high five, and seeing a police car and an ambulance and the like, to the high school with a very, I think, moving, echoing taps being played by Mr. Fogno, who's here recording tonight, and two other students, or three other students throughout the building during a moment of silence, and in between in terms of lessons or activities in all the schools. I also want to thank our choir from the high school, members of our choir, and Ms. Blanchard for really a very outstanding performance at the borough's 9/11 ceremony on Saturday at 9 a.m. Not only are the students and the teacher volunteering come down on Saturday morning, but you know, they did that with being in school for 2 days and very limited opportunity to get together to rehearse, and they were fabulous. In terms of the building, again, I want to keep this brief because obviously it's warm in here. With the high school, the new chiller that will take care of the entire Mortimer Avenue wing was installed last week of August on time, was running beautifully, and then the night of the storm, Ida, right? That was the storm. It, through a power surge, I suppose, as I informed the board, the motherboard burnt out. So we're in the process of getting a new one shipped to be installed. There are maybe 8 areas in the building that don't have air conditioning, this being one of them. The others still have window units because we didn't do the facade yet, so the window units are there, and the Elliott wing has the window units. So some areas we have to keep this area open. Thankfully, during the first weeks of school with the open lunch here at the high school, most students do leave. We also have opened up our courtyard for availability for lunch. And the classes where there is not air, okay, or windowless rooms have all been relocated. We were able to do that. So we're hoping that within the next week, you know, we're at the mercy of the shipment getting here. That gets remedied, but it was a product of the storm. And again, when you're in this area, it certainly does feel uncomfortable. It reminds me of what school used to feel like. But in the majority of this building, we still have the air conditioning going. Mr. Kelly, do you want to give any updates on anything else with building while we're here?
Well, no, I'll discuss it with you.
Okay. Pierpont and Union moving along. The high school work, except for punch list items, is essentially done until Phase 2 begins next spring. And we will have, again, a major amount of work as the entire facade gets replaced. There are still some things that have to get done in Phase 1, but the majority of work is done. Work will be ongoing at Union and Pierpont throughout the year. So again, for the sake of time and heat, I'll end my report there. Okay, I'll have a few comments at various parts of the agenda.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hurley. Any questions from board members? All right, then we are going to move on to the report of the president. First of all, I want to echo congratulations to the faculty, staff, and administration for a successful opening of school. Each year since I've been board president, I've had the opportunity to be able to address faculty and staff. I'm 2 for 2 on doing it by email, but my message was one of real hope and optimism and preparedness for this year, and also just one of humility and gratitude, because really wonderful seeing the energy and enthusiasm of all the faculty and staff, and really excited for the year to come. I want to give a special sort of shout out thank you to Mr. Morano, because over Labor Day weekend he spent a little additional time working on scheduling and doing everything we could to make sure we had all the students in the building safely, given the things that Mr. Hurley talked about. Also on a larger scale, I want to say that for those board members who got to visit the buildings and get an update on the buildings projects, it was really pretty fantastic to see all the progress. Everything is where it should be, and the gym at Pierpont is really close to being done. It was super exciting to see that, and to see all the progress with the high school classrooms, the science lab, the Pierpont Union classrooms was really fantastic. And even just the 21st century flexible furniture, I think really speaks to the vision for the district. So just want to say thank you, Mr. Kelly and Mr. Hurley, for organizing that. And the principals who were ready at each building, and EPIC and the architects and so forth. Also wanted to acknowledge and mention, I think it's really exciting. This is, I think, the second year now where we're running our own before and after care, Bulldog Care, and it's been really successful. And again, just want to thank Mr. Hurley and the district for their vision of having us take on Bulldog Care and seeing how many students there are enrolled. Next thing I wanted to mention, so for the board self-evaluation, we are going to be doing that. I have enlisted both Dr. Racine and Mr. Bogosian, who, thank you to you both in advance, who are going to help set up the board self-evaluation. And we're going to make that available to everyone by the end of September. And I'm going to ask everyone to complete the board self-evaluation by November 1st. That'll give everyone about 5 weeks or so to do that. The goal is to be able to discuss it, if we can, at the November 15th board meeting. This way, we don't have to worry about Thanksgiving and December holidays backing us up in terms of that getting done. Also gives us time to discuss it, and with all the current board to be able to talk about recommendations as we look forward toward the next set of goals. And finally, just a reminder, now that we're in person and a lot more of our events are coming in person, it's really important that as a board that we show our support by being present at the different events that we can. So whether it's athletics, performing arts, different events that are being hosted by the school in different ways, let's all make sure that we have some kind of a board presence in all those events. So that is it for my president's remarks. Any questions or comments? Mrs. Jones.
Is Mr. Hurley and Mr. Kelly going to do the board self-evaluation this year? Are you going to consider doing it? No?
I think we'll talk about it afterward, and then I'll get back to you.
It was optional, wasn't it?
Yep. Thank you for that. Other comments? Okay, hearing none, we're going to move on to the meeting portion that's open to the public. We do this traditionally in 2 ways. The first time we open the meeting to the public is for items related to the agenda, and the second time we open to the public, it is for items either related or not related to agenda items. So just a reminder, we ask everyone to keep remarks to about 3 minutes, and we are listening and taking notes and appreciative of comments that the community has. We are going to do this in 2 rounds. So tonight, for the first round, we're going to open the meeting now to items related to the agenda only. So at 7:46 p.m., we will open the meeting to the public. Okay, seeing no comments, at 7:46 p.m. we're going to close the meeting to the public, and we're going to move on to new business where there's action to be taken. We should be able to sail through this. So we're going to start with personnel in Ms. Ahmed's absence. Mr. Bogosian, will you take us through it?
Yes, we have not had a personnel meeting since the last board meeting. Tonight, we have 19 motions to consider. Motions 1 through 9 are resignations and appointments of faculty and staff, as listed in the agenda. Motion 10 is salary adjustment for 3 faculty members. Motion 11 is 6th class for 4 faculty members. Motions 12 and 13 are disability leave for 2 faculty members. Motion 14 is a co-curricular assignment. Motion 15 is an appointment of 4 counselors for Bulldog Care. Motion 16 is a supplementary Title I program. Motion 17 is appointment of a substitute teacher. Motion 18 is 3 travel reimbursements. Motions 19 and 20 are being tabled. And motion 21 is an addendum for another appointment of a counselor for Bulldog Care.
Okay, so we're looking to move items 1 to 18 on the agenda and then 21?
Correct.
Okay. Questions or comments from board members? Nope. Okay, you want to make a motion?
I would like to move motions 1 through 18 and motion 21.
All right, do we have a second? Mr. Healy? Any last questions or comments? Hearing none, Mr. Kelly, please take roll.
Mr. Bogosian?
Yes.
Mr. Healy?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Mazzone?
Yes.
Dr. Racine?
Yes.
Mr. Sprayberry?
Yes.
Dr. Owadi?
Yes.
Motion's carried. Thank you.
Thank you. We will move on now to curriculum and instruction. Ms. Jones?
Yes, thank you. There are 4 resolutions tonight for board member approval. Mr. Hurley, do you want me to read board goals, or?
I think you said it stated.
I think you can say as stated if you want. It's up to you, but you can say as stated if you want.
Okay, then I'll say as stated. Resolution 2 is nursing service plan. Resolution 3 is home instruction for 1 student. And the resolution 4 has to do with curriculum guides for revised curriculum, one for French classes. And that's it.
All right, questions or comments from board members? All right, Ms. Jones, you want to move those?
I move resolutions 1 through 4 under curriculum and instruction.
All right, do we have a second? Mr. Sprayberry, any last comments or questions? Hearing none, Mr. Kelly?
Mr. Bogosian?
Yes.
Mr. Healy?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Mazzone?
Yes.
Dr. Racine?
Yes.
Mr. Sprayberry?
Yes.
Dr. Owadi?
Yes.
Motion's carried. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We'll move on now to finance. Dr. Racine.
All right, finance, we have 7 items here tonight. First is the approval of bills. Number 2 is the July transfer report. Number 3 are budget transfers as listed. Number 4 is a donation by the K-Center PTA. Thank them for that. Number 5 is school bus auction. These are buses we're trying to get rid of. Finally auction them off again. Number 6 is the business admin's merit goals. Try to improve those. Number 7 is installation of CCTVs, and this is not from our budget. This is from a state grant, so no cost.
Okay, thank you. Any comments on any of these, Mr. Kelly?
Just to elaborate on that last point, number 7, the closed circuit TV. This is the state's security bond. If you remember, the state put that out for a vote 3 or 4 years ago, $500 million, and it was approved. It's finally trickling down, and that's our portion. We also did the Alyssa's Law signals with this. That was a separate piece of this, but this is what remains for the closed circuit TV. Thank you.
We're glad to see we're getting something for that.
Yes.
All right. Any questions or comments from board members? Mr. Sprayberry.
I'd like to point out there's a misprint within the Buildings and Grounds Committee for the business administrator's merit goal. It is under Buildings and Grounds on page 11 of it.
No.
Yeah, there are 2 of them, actually. One
There's
is more
2.
finance related, one is more buildings and
Reference.
grounds. So that was intentional.
So it should be continued.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions? Hearing none. Dr. Racine?
I'd like to 7.
All right, do we have a second? Mr. Mazzone, any questions or comments? All right, Mr. Kelly, please take roll.
Mr. Bogosian?
Yes.
Mr. Healy?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Mazzone?
Yes.
Dr. Racine?
Yes.
Mr. Sprayberry?
Yes.
Dr. Alati?
Yes.
Motion's carried. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move on now to policy. Mr. Healy.
Yes, we did not have a committee meeting since our last board meeting. There are two resolutions being put forth tonight. Resolution 1 is listed 3 abolished policies and 1 new policy, named the Road Forward. And this is the second reading, and they are mandatory. The second resolution being put forth for a first reading, which is mandatory, and that's named the school employee vaccination requirements. So I'd like to put these put forth.
Okay, thank you. Questions or comments from board members? Good? All right, and you put those forward?
Yes, I'd like to put
All right,
these
Mr.
forward.
Bogosian is second. Any final comments or questions? All right, hearing none. Mr. Kelly.
Mr.
Gave you an extra
Bogosian?
degree.
Yes.
Mr. Bogosian?
Yes.
Mr. Healy?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Mazzone?
Yes.
Dr. Racine?
Yes.
Mr. Sprayberry?
Yes.
Dr. Alati?
Yes.
Motion's carried. Thank you.
All right, we're going to go into buildings and grounds now. Mr. Sprayberry.
Good evening. We have 2 resolutions to put forward by the recommendation superintendent. First is the closeout of the kindergarten center renovation, closeout allowance back to the schools. We have code compliance, cost escalation, and additional scopes for Fairmont High School, 3 change orders. And we have 1 for Union Middle School to replace signage and a slab work over there at Union Middle School. And the business administrator's miracle in relation to the referendum and the business area. So I'd like to put those forward.
Okay. Questions or comments from board members?
Well,
Mr. Kelly?
May
Go
I?
ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Just to go into a little more detail on the change orders, as Mr. Sprayberry indicated, the kindergarten center is essentially done at this point. The last thing they had to do was the permanent fencing out front. That is done. So this closes out the allowance management. So it's almost $14,000, which goes back to the district. It goes back to, not to the district, but back into the fund for additional projects or whatever. I'm gonna skip down to Union School. Front signage, I don't think anybody realized it. That's the Union School, Rutherford, New Jersey, up at the top. I don't think anybody realized a lot of that was missing and repainted in. It was actually, physical letters installed. So we're redoing the whole thing. So, we new columns, we need new signage. The new slab in the existing gym, we talked about that last time. We had a change order that time for $33,000 to remove that slab. Remember, we talked about the steam pipe tunnel underneath that was creating structural problems. So there's a $28,000 in here, which is to replace that slab. And then fiber run from the new structure to the IT room that was something that was not included. Pierpont, I wanted to just spend a little time on this because 2 things here in particular. One, at this point now, Bismarck has exceeded the allowance management that was part of the contract. The contract included $250,000 for any change orders, any things that came along that we identified that we needed to do differently or we needed to change the scope. And as Mr. Sprayberry indicated, some of these were code compliance issues, some of them are just cost escalations, and some are design changes. So we've exceeded that, the $250,000. So now we're into what is technically called change orders. I use the terms interchangeably, but I shouldn't. So I just want you to be aware of that now, we have the funds to cover it, so that's not a concern. But one of the things that this does is that while these cost changes were part of the allowance management, the contractor could not submit any profit margin figures in there. Per the contract, once we slip into change orders, then they have the right to add in profit margin component on this. So, to that end, the numbers that I have here are wrong, because I thought we were approaching this one way, and apparently we're not. So the correct numbers here, if you want to make a note, for code compliance, where it is $66,000, the correct number is $69,716.41. The minutes will reflect that number. The cost escalation is $29,000. That does not change. The additional scope and design changes of $80,000. The minutes are going to reflect $88,215.57. That's an increase of about $10,400, and that's the profit margin component on items that are now change orders as opposed to part of the allowance management. Again, we have the funds for this, so that's not an issue. In terms of what's being done here, code compliance, there's a lot of things here. The rerun the condensate lines from classroom univents. This was something that Mr. Dansback had requested. Additional asbestos abatement in the old gym. That gym was 100 years old. Nobody really knew what was up there above the ceiling, and it turns out there's a lot of asbestos up there. And installation of temporary windows and doors in the new gym. We talked about that last time, and that the permanent windows are delayed, and this is an industry-wide issue, but we needed to get something in place so that we could install the floor. The floor can only be installed under the proper climate conditions. So we did proceed with that. Cost escalations, we talked about that. I believe that's the full extent of that. And additional scope and design changes, additional data drops and connections, conduits, offset paint in the new gym, and that's the ceiling, which plans had called for all white, but the beams are now going to be painted blue, which will improve the look quite a bit. I also want to point out, going back to Union School, we've gotten a couple of requests from the contractor for change orders to extend the deadline. The deadline for the new gym was supposed to be the end of October this year, and that would be a TCO date. They have requested an additional 35 days due to a number of factors. We have agreed to provide 20 days, and that's due to, because they were able to document weather conditions that prevented them from working, and also labor issues. And that too is an industry-wide issue, getting the laborers in here, onto any job. In recent days now, they have come back and said they need an additional 48 days onto the deadline. That would push us into April, which is far too close for comfort. So we're pushing back on that. We've spoken to Epic. They understand where we're coming from, and we're going to proceed to push back, and we'll keep you posted. But just want to let you know that's out there.
Can I make two comments before we move the...
Please.
First on Union School and, and some of the issues here. There's a tremendous amount of time and energy and pushback on these topics. Sometimes a full-time job, because we're working not only with the contractor, we're working with the GC, we're working with the subcontractors, we're working with Epic, we're working with PSA, and then also engineers that they bring in to oversee certain things. And I want to commend Mr. Kelly and also Mr. Paterno and the building principals, because especially to get to open school. I mean, I mentioned before the enjoyment I had seeing the holes filled. I was just happy we could open all the buildings because we really had a lot, 0-hour stuff to get done. So there's been a lot of heavy lifting being done in Mr. Kelly's office and some of the other offices around the district. The comment about the Pierpont with the temporary doors and the like, the facade here, there are some windows, like the windows in the locker room that you see on Fairview and on Mortimer, and the gym windows that you can see from Fairview if you look up. Those are the real windows that are going to be there. Other things like the new doors on the Mortimer wing, those are not the new doors. That storefront was also delayed because of industry problems with aluminum and the like. So those are temporary doors just so that we could have a door to open the building and secure the building. So, right now, if you're looking at things, it's really, some of it's patchwork for the next 9 months, and some of it's permanent. And hopefully you can tell the difference when you see it. But The doors, the way they are on the 4 doors, are not the way they're going to be when the building's done. But we are running into more and more problems with supplies, and also folks having the supplies somewhere out in the middle of the country and getting the trucks to get it here. Where, there's more and more issues with drivers and buses. We're dealing with that as well, trucks. So, it's been a struggle, but we're at it every day. And again, I want to thank particularly Mr. Kelly and Mr. Paterno, who've been at the forefront of this.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from board members? Mr. Mazzone?
Yeah, just a comment. The demolition at Pierpont, I have to say, was impressive. When I went by and took a look, just to see the old gym completely gone and to see the progress with the new gym and the lack of any service interruptions to our students, I thought was fabulous. So I think it was a great job, done by all. But I also want to acknowledge the work that's, that you all are doing, juggling, the administrators, as well as, yourself, Jack and Mr. Kelly, because I think balancing this with running our schools is truly commendable, and to do it in such a way with great transparency, I know for me, and I'm sure my colleagues, we appreciate it.
Thank you. And I want to give credit also, we talked about the contractors working with the contractor over at Pierpont. Really has been a pleasure, and they take a lot of pride in what they're doing. And I think, when we took the tour, you could see when the project manager was there, how excited he was to show the members of the board, what the new gym looked like, and to envision what it was going to look like when it was done. So it's been a real collaborative effort. But yeah, this has not been, with all the other things going on, this has not been an easy ride for anybody. And it's going to be another year plus to get to what's going to be a very, very outstanding project once it's completed.
Agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Early and Mr. Mazzone. Concur with your comments. Any last questions or comments before we move the buildings and grounds items? Mr. Bogosian?
Was the retaining wall at the K Center, is that not part of the change orders, or is that something completely
It's not-
separate?
We weren't able to get that done this summer, so we're going to work to get that
Oh,
done
okay.
next summer.
All right, Mr. Sprayberry, do you want to move those?
Yes, I'd like to move to motions under the Building Grounds Committee and the recommendations of superintendent.
All right, we have a second.
Second?
Ms. Jones, any last comments or questions? Hearing none, Mr. Kelly?
Mr. Bogosian?
Yes.
Mr. Healy?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Mazzone?
Yes.
Dr. Racine?
Yes.
Mr. Sprayberry?
Yes.
Dr. Oladi?
Yes.
Motion's carried. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to move on now to old business. Does anyone have any old business? Mr. Healy?
Just one item, and I mentioned it to Mr. Kelly. You might want to consider the virtual, the New Jersey SBA conference in October is virtual again. And I know last year, Mr. Kelly did I believe, a subscription for all of us. I don't know if you want to consider that again. But
I'd like to
That's
go.
it.
What
Well,
are the
last,
dates?
I have to look at it, because last year we did a cost-benefit analysis, because the pricing was such, and I think it's similar this year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Get up to like 25 people for X number of dollars, which
Yeah,
made sense as
yeah.
long as more than 2 or 3 people
Yeah.
were interested in participating at all. So we signed up administrators, we signed up all the board members, so we'll take a look at that, but I think we'll probably end up signing everybody up.
Okay,
for the whole
thank
thing.
you.
Do you have the dates on that?
It starts the end of October, but then it runs pretty much, you have access, right, for,
Well, last one was 1 year.
Oh, it's not live, it's
No.
recorded sessions? Okay.
It's
But more-
virtual, and you'd have access to the classes for the next year.
yeah,
so-
I think so, it was a year, right?
Yeah.
A year, yeah. And also some of the required training for the board, right? You could get,
That's in the
so if
same
you're up for some training, right, you could get through there. I think-
Okay.
Thank you.
And I think the majority of these conferences are going back in person and live, but this is the largest, if I'm not mistaken, the largest one in the state. And at the time when they had to plan it, get everybody all together, they still weren't certain about whether or not it could go live or not. So, I think the rest of the quote big conferences are being held in person, but this one is very large and needed a lot more lead time to plan.
Okay, any other old business? Then we will move on to the legislative update. Ms. Jones.
Just one quick one tonight. This is New Jersey Assembly Bill number 5835, and it's introduced by P. Christopher Tully, who's Bergen and Passaic. This provides that a public school used as a polling place shall not be open for classes on the day of election. Now, we close for the general election, but we're usually open for the primary. The board may use the day for in-service training for professional development for teaching staff, and this purpose is to ensure the safety of students when an increased number of individuals are in the building. So I don't know if that changes. It's not through yet, but
It's not through yet, right. Well, yeah, it would change a lot of things calendar-wise in terms of, and also professional development, like in the second week of June is, it's debatable, right?
Just a little update, at least that I have. There is going to be early voting in New Jersey, and
But not-
from what I understand, the Williams Center is going to be one now.
I'm not sure where they're going, but you can't use the school for the early voting. Right,
So the schools are not.
right. So any of our
That's my
sites.
understanding
Right,
that would be it,
right,
so
right,
I'll let you know.
yeah.
Thank you, that's all.
Okay, thank you very much. Then at this time, it is 8:08 p.m., so we're going to open the meeting to the public for any items related to agenda items or non-agenda items. And just a reminder, when you come up to the microphone, you're addressing the board, so please make sure you're addressing us and state your name and your address. So we have that for the record. We ask that you please keep comments to 3 minutes. In my couple of years as board president, I haven't had to interrupt or stop anyone's comments because they've gone too long or become disrespectful or disparaging, and I applaud that as part of a community that's all working together. So with that, I'll open the meeting at 8:09 p.m. for public comments.
Stephanie Marizzo, 222 Orient Way. Thank you all for all that you do to get the school open and the kids excited about things. Thank you for having us and always taking our concerns and questions to heart. I emailed you, as I promised I would, a little bit about the Reach app I talked about at the last meeting. I hope you guys had a chance to look at my email, and I did ask some very pressing questions. I shared my letter with others, and I know people submitted the same version of the same letter. We do talk, and we communicate about some of the things that are a concern to each of us, and try to, really look at everything before we get upset and ask questions. So we want to make sure we're really informed. This Road Forward document is very frightening. And I started off my letter to you guys saying that. I was very concerned when I first read it on June 28th at like midnight, and probably all through the night until the next morning when I highlighted it. There's very concerning things in there. Beyond the masking, which we wasted so much time spinning our wheels with, because right now we have, and I don't mean it because it got debunked because our governor is clever, I mean because we should have also been impressing upon you how concerned we are about what this document says about testing, about vaccination. Because to me, there's a lot of very scary things in this document. I have to say, as an educator, and I've shared that with you before, I've seen other districts taking this to a different level. Hoboken is randomly testing kids. They are mandating testing. They are going to mandate the vaccine for our students, in Hoboken. As a parent here, I'm very concerned about this. We send our kids here to go to school, to get an education, to play sports, to make friends, not for this kind of thing. And I'm going to back up to some of my original thoughts on this. When the NEA, put out that meeting to teach teachers how to talk to students, and I mean, this is something I was privy to because I'm a teacher, and I read what was being taught. So I hope you guys really did look at that. incentivizing teachers to talk about this, which should be a personal thing. This is not what belongs in a classroom. And I feel for boards, because you're given this document that this was not what you wanted to do either. You wanted to come here and get our kids caught up on math and language arts. But this is dangerous. I asked Mr. Hurley, I shared that with you, teachers are not talking about this from what you told me. This is not being discussed in class. That made me feel good. That made me feel better. We're doing the right things here. This doesn't belong in a school. Neither does personal opinions about it. But I mean, this document's encouraging it. It's encouraging districts to promote vaccination, testing programs. So my next question for Mr. Hurley was what's going to happen with testing and screening? Some schools, and when you read this document, it's like, well, the nurse could do it, or anybody who's got some PPE and training. That doesn't make me feel very comfortable. So where's parental informed consent? Why should a kid who's not sick be tested? Again, this is not what we send them to school for. So again, I appreciate you taking the stance of this not being a part of any nonsense that's going on right now. Jeez, man, that went fast today. All right, let me get to my bullet points here. I have a problem with this promoting vaccination. I want you to understand, and I'm speaking on behalf of a lot of parents, we don't want a mandatory vaccination in this district. We do not want mandatory testing. We do not want randomized testing. This is something that if you want to do for your child, that's a parent's choice. It should not be mandated by a district. The stats have been very good here. You're always on top of the local data. That being said, I just want to make sure that that's still what's going to happen here, because we know the governor keeps putting out new rules and legislation, and this constantly keeps changing. And it seems very vindictive. You know, we were trying to get the mask thing debunked, and all of a sudden he was like, we have kids with IEPs who can't get a mask exemption, not particularly here that I know of, but other parents are talking. That's disgraceful. I'm a special education teacher. That's disgraceful that the governor is mandating. He doesn't know a damn thing about education. He doesn't know about autistic kids and kids with sensory perception issues being forced to wear a mask. So now you have to go to a doctor who's afraid to give their honest medical opinion to protect your child. Where does that leave parents? Where it leaves them is a lot of parents have pulled their kids out of school into pods. And at first I was like, not me. But I gotta tell you, they're growing and people are doing these things. Parents are concerned, they're fed up, and they're going in other directions. I never want to be put in that position.
Ms. Marisa, we're at about 4.5 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to wrap up for you. I'm concerned also about the grant that I asked you about. There is a grant that the CDC and the U.S. Health and Human Services Department was encouraging to implement mandatory testing and screening for all students. Please don't sell my kid. Please don't sell their kids. Please don't do that for grant money. I'm happy we got the ESSER funds. I always want to see money coming into this district. I'll sell as many cupcakes as you need. Please don't ever sell our children. This is very important to all of us. Parental choice. This is a product that comes with known risks. And depending on what news you listen to, you're going to believe it, you're not. This comes with known risks. Please keep our children, and this is what we all took an oath to as an educator, as board members, is to protect the children and to protect these children. We're the parents, we're trying to protect our children. Please meet us there and continue to protect them and make good decisions. And please just reassure me that that's still the case. We're not going to be doing mandatory testing, screening. No one will be touching our kids in school, randomly pulling them. Please tell me that's still the plan for what's going to go on here. And again, thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to wait until comments are concluded, and then either Mr. Hurley and or I will make any appropriate comments to address. So other comments from the public?
So I don't speak in public very often, so I apologize for reading this. Matria Fedorko, 84 East Van Ness. Just said it. Democracy is being lost. Our rights are willingly being surrendered because of our complacency, refusal, or maybe even fear to question authority, and refusal to look at independent, nonpartisan research. There was a time in history when Americans were seen as out-of-the-box thinkers, open to discussing all ideas. We encouraged the fall of the Berlin Wall, encouraged the freedom-hungry and deprived Soviet masses to stand up against their communist government. That was only 30 years ago. Today, the Cubans are begging for our support to no avail. Where are our strong, smart, compassionate, and democratic citizens and leaders? Have we just become a bunch of apathetic sheep, allowing government to make our decisions? Too comfortable to analytically think and debate? And most importantly, accountable to no one. Therein lies my major issue with masks and any other executive mandates. As far as I know, we are still a democratic country. Mandates are forced on people without rights. We are not there yet. And nor do I ever want to be in a place without human rights. It is wrong to give up our rights for a cause that is at best debatable. I encourage you to think about the path we are choosing by accepting mandates of any type. This path is not ethical. It is not constitutional. Are you accepting authoritarianism a little at a time? Quote, for the good of for the common good, as is often justified. Mandates are anti-democratic. When did we vote out democracy? How do we stop mandates once we've already started to accept them? We all get second opinions for health conditions and a second estimate on a construction job. It is considered routine and expected. Nobody gets upset because a second opinion was requested. It's the American way. It's the smart way. Why are we not allowing this with face masks and vaccine mandates? There is a second opinion, as we've seen in these Board of Education meetings. We should, at the very least, be voting for these decisions. Our schools have anti-bullying policies, is that correct? Yes. Why are parents being bullied into submission? Why can't parents decide what is best for their child? The government could not mail a letter that I sent to my children to camp this summer. Only 50% of the letters that I mailed arrived. It's time to question our government. Why are we trusting them with our bodies when they can't even mail a letter? Why are they even making decisions about our individual bodies? Isn't that still considered private property? Why are we allowing them to take away our rights? We do not have to follow unjust mandates. We are a government of the people, by the people, for the people. Americans and Rutherford deserve an honest debate, a second opinion, not mandates. Thomas Jefferson said, if a law is unjust, a man is not only right to disobey it, he is obligated to disobey it.
Thank you. Can I just ask, if you don't mind, can you just give us your name and address again? We couldn't hear it in the beginning.
Motria Fedorko, 84 East Van Ness.
Thank you.
Good evening. Laura Furno, 326 West Passaic Avenue. I'm here tonight for my son Max, who started first grade this year. I'm sorry, it's just emotional for me. Before discussing the policies currently in place or possibly coming into play, we must begin where all of this started, with COVID-19. It's a nightmare, and we are all navigating through it the best we can every day, and we're being impacted in the very confusing and often conflicting policies and procedures in place. With back to school this year, we learned we had to add masks to the list of school essentials. As masks became established as a requirement for the upcoming school year, we started to hear rumblings of surrounding districts, like Hoboken, implementing testing, preventative testing, in every child. Now we're seeing a push for vaccinations in younger children. And we're seeing this happen in towns all around New Jersey. We are going to test asymptomatic children. Imagine how this will work out with no virtual option. This will affect their grades. This will affect their stability, not to mention the many working parents who are now required to be back in the office. This is going to affect everyone, everywhere. Is this about politics? Is this about the virus? Or is this about the health of our children? Children's mortality rate for COVID is 0. When we talk about COVID, the data for children and how we quantify the risk potential must be qualified by the specifics of what's happening specifically with children, not the data for adults. Children are not being impacted the same way adults are. They don't carry the same viral load that adults have. They are not spreading the virus like adults do. So why are the children being so heavily regimented in policy? Is this about politics? Is this about the virus? Is this about the health of our children? Policy is ever changing with COVID. The grip is tightening at every turn, and it's stressful for me as an adult. Imagine how this is impacting our vulnerable children. What is the long-term implications to the conditioning they are enduring all day, every day at school? Walk this way, not that way. Sit here, away from that potentially dangerous child. Stay back and eat by yourself, but they're surrounded by children they can't interact with in any meaningful way. I'm here to ask, I'm here to suggest, is there a better way? Do these children have to sit socially distanced from each other and wear a mask all day? Can they wear the mask into the school and once seated while socially distanced, take the masks off? Do they have options? Do we have options? Can we look at this? With mask wearing, people are mouth breathing much more, and this does carry associated adverse health effects. I understand parents have already brought to the attention of the board many studies from PubMed, from the CDC, and many more sources showing the risks of masks as well as inefficacy. If only 5% of these risks from these studies are possible, is this worth the risk? Our family can go to any restaurant with a big group of people, friends, whoever we want, but then we're sending our children to school and we're making them sit separate. Are these children or are these criminals? Why don't we put the tables together like they do in restaurants? Let the children enjoy a lunchtime in a comfortable setting away from these restrictions. Put the tables like we would in a restaurant because the restaurants are open. It seems to be working. With new mandates and more restrictions continuing, why is virtual learning not an option? How are parents not given a choice if we are being told that the threat to our children is so critical, we have to keep them a distance away from each other all day and also wear a mask?
So I'm going to ask you to please wrap up your time.
When I think of health, I think of healthy and nutritious food, keeping our immune system strong. Are there discussions in place to support the local schools so they may provide the students with fresh, non-processed, healthy food? Is that an area we have room for improvement? Do you know the options at the local schools? Have you seen those menus? In addition to this, why is there no snack time? My son has told us he's hungry at school since just the past few days. He's eating once in 6.5 hours. Not factoring travel time to school and making the food, that's a long time for a child. Why are we taking snack time away? What offense did snack time commit? Maintaining healthy blood sugar levels, keeping children fed is important for concentration and energy. And isn't that a win for the school? And what is a learning environment? I have more, so I'll be back. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other comments from the public?
I'm sure you guys will remember me, Marissa Iannuzzi, 288 Riverside Avenue. I don't have a lot to say. My stance is still the same. I just want to thank everybody who spoke today because those were some amazing, truthful words. And I think what all of us here want is you guys to support our children. They go to school in this district. You guys are supposed to be supporting them. We get it's a mandate. We get it. But if the people who are up here supporting and supposed to be supporting our children are not willing to step up and make a stand to speak for the truth and for the health of our children and for us having a choice in that, what you guys are just complying. And I don't think that's what a lot of people want. We want people who are gonna fight for our kids, and that's what I have to say.
All right, thank you.
I wasn't planning on speaking today. I'm Jessica Morales. I'm at 127 Prospect Place. To piggyback on some of the things that these ladies said, my daughter has an IEP, and she's already anxious going to school every day. To actually have her to take a test every day or once a week, she'll never want to come to school again. And finally getting her to a point where she's okay with going to school. Now to actually say, okay, you need to take a test to enter the building, she's not coming back. Sorry. So I ask that this is not part of the curriculum. Masking, she's okay with. I haven't even mentioned that to her yet. She seems to be fine with it. But as far as coming in to take a test or to force a vaccination, I'm not going to get her through the door. So that's just, my thought on it. And again, I don't have a prepared speech. Thank you.
Thank you.
Violetta Makash, 229 Orion Way. The mom there, she spoke about communism. I'm sure none of you know what it means. I was born in a communism in Albania, and I was raised there until the age of 10. I can guarantee you don't know what it means. You don't know the government to come in class and shot you, inject you every type of medicine, and seeing your classroom drop dead. Next day another one, next day side effects, and parents could not speak up because otherwise they would be moved and forced in camps, or they would be thrown in jail, and all that stuff. I see what's happening. Maybe none of you sees it, but I lived it. The government say you gotta obey, you gotta comply. Today is the mask, tomorrow is the vaccine. What's next? What's next? That's what you guys don't see it. It's really bad. The whole world. In Europe, you cannot even get on a subway without the green pass. If you don't have the vaccine, you can go to work. In school, if you don't have the vaccine, you can go to school. What about the parent who needs to take the kids to the hospital? If you don't have the vaccine, or if you don't have the card because you're poor, you can take your kids to the hospital. Or if you don't comply, you're gonna go to jail. What's next, people? Our kids, I will die. To the last breath that I can, I will fight for my kids, and to don't have to go through what I've been through. As a kid, I still remember. So please, please, we all want to work, but there is something more important than just money. That's all.
Michael Furno, 326 West Passaic. So I have to say it's been pretty interesting. One is, ironically, for a public meeting, I couldn't hear 70% of what you were saying, mostly because you were wearing masks. Two is, I've been here for, half hour, 45 minutes. I'm sweating profusely into my mask. Imagine what it's like for a 6-year-old to have to do the same thing for 6 hours. I want to remind you all, as you're sitting here, that I get what you have to do. I understand public service. I understand the BS of bureaucracy. After 20 years of a company that I made millions of dollars for, I was told that if I did not get a vaccine, that I would be fired. And the only time in the last 4 years that I was sick is after I got that vaccine. So, I want to remind you all here that even though you have to deal with bureaucracy, even though that you have to deal with finances and things that we can't possibly understand because we're not sitting in your seats, I want to remind you that you are public servants. and that this is a school. It is not a hospital. You are not employing doctors, immunologists, radiologists, pulmonologists. You employ teachers. You employ educators, right? You're not members of the Gestapo to get that incredibly dangerous Murphy document credence. Now, I understand that there might be some money at stake, and I understand that there might be some funding at stake. But in a meeting that began with a pledge of allegiance to the flag, I think that you all understand that there's much more at stake than that, okay? So we are here to support you as long as we think that you have our children's best interest in mind. But if you do not, understand now that player 2 has entered the game. We are watching and we are putting you on notice. Thank you.
Hi there. Kathleen Campbell, 25 Carlton Place. I echo the sentiment of my peers here, and I commend all of you for championing this. It's remarkable to see all of you out here fighting for our children when so many are kind of slamming the doors in their faces, is how I see it. My purpose tonight is not to talk about the mask, however. I have a sixth grader, Julian Kay, who is at Pierpont School. And this summer, I joined a group of parents and I started understanding the curriculum changes that were going throughout the state that came about June of 2020 in terms of the comprehensive health and physical education curriculum. And at the urging of Superintendent Hurley, I read the 66-page document that relates to the New Jersey learning standards for students, I believe it's called. I might be a little bit off on that. And I was pretty shocked to find a lot of things that I learned in terms of what the curriculum is to be enforced on our children that I feel in nature is a little too sensitive for their grade level. With that, I've asked tons of questions to Superintendent Hurley. I've gone to Nora Peck at the Bergen County Department of Education. I've contacted the Trenton Department of Education and spoke with Lenny Parham about this. And it seems like we're being forced to allow our children to be educated on things that we might not agree with. And I have submitted an opt-out letter to the district for certain things such as family health, sexual education, some things I'm being denied on in terms of LGBTQ education, transgender education, which I believe at some point my 10-year-old should be exposed to. However, I think at 10 years old in the 6th grade, he's not quite mature enough for that. So my point here is, since I'm so confused about how the standards apply to the curriculum and the integration to our school system, I would like to see if there's a possibility we can have an open forum with the Board of Ed, with the, I believe Mr. Hurley referenced the Parent Academy and an association with the school. I'm sorry, my notes are a little jumbled. Just so that we can ask them questions and understand how this is going to work, how it's going to affect our children, exactly what they're going to be exposed to. I've seen as of 5th grade, they're supposed to learn about masturbation and sexual feelings, and that's a little jarring for me. I'm 41 years old. I can't imagine in 5th grade to be taught about that. I can't understand how that would be taught to my child, any child for that matter. So I'm hoping that there's a way that maybe we can work with Nora Peck to come in and explain some of these things to us so that we have the utmost transparency in how our children are going to be educated, how we're allowed to opt out of these certain programs that maybe we don't agree with because of our personal religious beliefs. And that's all. I just want some kind of better form of communication so that parents are aware of what these new standards are being pushed down that they might not know of, because they were put into play June of 2020 when everyone was worried that they could go to the shore or go to a restaurant or see their friends. They kind of were a little blindsided by this, just like myself. So that's all. I thank you for your time, and I hope that that's a possibility.
Thank you. Other comments? Okay, hearing none, at 8:36 p.m., we're going to close the floor and So I'm going to ask Mr. Hurley.
Just a couple of comments.
He's going to make some
Just
comments.
a couple of
to address some
comments.
comments made.
Appreciate people coming out here tonight and listening to what you have to say. Just a few comments if I can work on a few things. I've been here a long time, and I'm sure there's been a couple of times when what I'm going to say hasn't rung true. But I think for the most part, when I say something, I try to see it through. I thought I made my answer very clear that I am not in favor of, and I speak for the board is not in favor of, and the administration is not in favor of testing students. Okay? Now, I've said before, I don't care if Hoboken's testing students. That's their decision. I can't, I spoke about mandates, and I talked about our legal obligation to follow mandates at the last 2 or 3 meetings you folks were at. I'm not going to repeat that again. But when I have the choice to make the recommendation to the board, which I have, we are not testing students. We are not a medical facility. Now, there is a mandate for faculty and staff. And they either have to be vaccinated, right, or they have to submit testing. That's for faculty and staff. We're not testing faculty and staff. If they don't get vaccinated, they have to present their testing, but we're not doing it. Our nurses aren't doing it. So again, I'm not going to stand here and tell you, I don't know what's going to come down the pike, right? Neither do you. And if something comes down, a mandate that we either feel we can't do or shouldn't do, and how we're going to respond, I'm not going to give conjecture about that. But I will say what I said in the email replies to people, that we are not testing students on our own volition. That's not what we're doing. Nor do I have any intention of wanting to do that. Now, if the mandate should come down and we have to deal with it, we'll figure that out. But tonight you were speaking about us doing this on our own. That's not happening. A couple of other just quick comments. I do appreciate that it's very warm in here tonight. Our entire district is air conditioned except for these rooms that are affected by the chiller. So, and the mask mandate does allow for teachers to discretion if you're in excessive heat to remove a mask.
So this is not a back and forth at this point, so.
If you can, you want to
definitely
email me the question, or if you
Uh,
want to see me after the meeting, I'll answer your question. Okay?
Thank you.
So I just want to make that point. And this problem here in the high school is hopefully a short one. Okay? And as Dr. Eladi referred to, wherever it was possible, we moved those classes into air-conditioned parts of the building. In some cases, it's not possible. The woman who mentioned about snacks in the elementary school, I'm going to revisit that with the administrators there. Okay? Again, I'm not promising you the snacks in the elementary school. I'm going to revisit that topic with the administrators. Again, I'm not going to promise you it's going to change, but I'm going to revisit it. Okay? As far as seating in the elementary schools and all the schools, they're 3 feet apart. They're sitting at tables. They're not all sitting in chairs. They're using the reading mats again, or will be. Remember, we've only been open for 3 days. Okay? So a lot of things that haven't happened yet wouldn't have happened yet in a normal year. 3 feet is a lot closer than you think it is. It's rare. I realize kindergarten kids, first grade kids, they're going to be on top of each other. But, this is 3 feet where my arm is out. Even little kids in a classroom are not that much closer most of the time. So, this is not last year. 6 feet is a significant amount. We couldn't have all the kids in the building at 6 feet. We now can at 3 feet. And remember, it could be less than 3 feet even if it's not 15 minutes. So, some of these rules, and again, I'm not here to revisit masks, but to the disruption to the school day, we're not going to be quarantining kids unless they're closer than 3 feet for more than 15 minutes, which is not going to happen in a school day because they do have a mask on. Now, again, you could be cynical and say, well, that's just like a wedge to get you to wear a mask, but we're not quarantining people. So, you know, I understand what you're saying, but I also think you have to understand what the reality is in the classrooms. In terms of the curriculum, Ms. Campbell, it's nice to meet you in person. As I told you today, we're going to take a look at that potential for somewhere down the line to have that conversation. I will tell you that I'm going to be honest, it comes down to trust in terms of the classroom teacher, in terms of the building administrator, in terms of how we take something and how we age appropriately relate it. I started off the meeting in talking about 9/11 and talking about the age appropriateness of the memorial, where at the high school, as a more of an historical lesson to young adults, it's important, I think, very important for kids at that age, young adults, young men and women, to understand what that day was like when they weren't alive during it. The kindergarten kids were giving drawings to first responders and high-fiving them. How we look at a mandate or a standard and how we use the judgment to deliver that, that's the important part of the equation. So, again, I don't want to spend a lot of time on that, but yes, you know, I am going to look into the feasibility of and how we would conduct a meeting along those lines. And the last thing on that topic, just for everybody here, because you brought it up, again, 5 decades in education, that's always, as far as I can remember, been the rule. Parents have a right to opt out of sex ed or family life ed and things involving dissection. That's under state law. You don't have the right to opt out of other things. There's not an a la carte menu, as Ms. Peck likes to say, for everything else. So, again, if someone has strong feelings and wants to have a conversation with the teacher, wants to have a conversation with the administrator about it, have that conversation. Okay? So, again, I appreciate your comments. And, you know, we don't know where, we don't know what's, you know, a lot of what was said here has very little to do with decisions made here. Okay? You know, you're talking about things out of Trenton, you're talking about things out of Washington. What we are trying to do here, I've said over and over again, is balance that with our reality. And keeping in mind that, yeah, we this board and I listen to, you know, have to hear the voices of parents. There are 2,700 students in the district. So we have to try to balance the voices of 2,700. And that's what we try to do. Okay? So those are just a few comments based on your comments, but again, I appreciate what you all had to say.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hurley. Not going to reiterate the same things, but just want to thank you for your comments. I want to thank all of you for your time being here this evening, continuing to take the time to share with us your thoughts and feedback. Hopefully you do know that we take everyone's feedback really seriously and do really appreciate your time and are taking notes on the things you've mentioned. So as there is no need for an executive session, I'd like to take a motion to adjourn the meeting. Mr. Bogosian, seconded by Mr. Mazzone. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? All right, at 8:46 p.m., we are adjourned.